friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and today I'm really excited because we are carrying on with our ADHD and money series. But today I want to focus on the traditional budgeting advice that doesn't really work for people who have ADHD and what we can do instead. I struggled with budgeting and money management in general for years, and I could never figure out why it didn't work for me. I wanted to do better. There was just something that was getting in the way, and I would try traditional budgeting advice and it just never worked for me. And as I have gotten into the personal finance space online and talked more about budgeting with ADHD, managing your money as a neurodiverse person, I've learned that that's very common and that a lot of the tips that are given for most people are designed for neurotypical people. And therefore a lot of them are just not going to work for us, but no one tells us that. So a lot of us just end up in this shame cycle, feeling like it's our fault that we're broken or lazy or we just don't want it enough, even though we know that that's not true. A lot of times when we have ADHD, we want these things. We know that getting better with money, figuring out a way to control our impulse spending would be helpful, but it never works the way that we want it to, and then it can really feel like it's on us and it's because we're just not doing enough. In reality, it's probably just because the systems that you're implementing weren't designed for you. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. We're going to address some of the traps that we kind of get stuck in and how to get ourselves out of those as well. So I have found when it comes to traditional budgeting and the tips that we get, it's designed for neurotypical people and it is designed based on goal setting. It looks toward the future. Do things today so that your future self will be taken care of. But a lot of times with people with ADHD, we're not motivated by doing things that will help us in the future. We need some of those tangible motivators right now. And unfortunately with traditional budgeting, that's just not how it's set up. It kind of just assumes that if you know where you want to go, you're going to do the work to get there. And that's not to say that anything around goal setting or sitting down with your budget on a daily basis or looking toward the future is a bad thing or ineffective. It's just to say that only focusing on those things is probably not enough to get most people with ADHD motivated to keep coming back to this task, especially once we're done with it. Like once the magic of creating that first budget has worn off, we can get into this trap of thinking that creating the perfect budget is the real solution. So we'll end up spending hours, you know me, if you've watched any of my YNAB videos, you know I could spend literal hours, days on that app creating the perfect budget. And that's because that challenge is really motivating to me right now. But how do we motivate ourselves to keep coming back to that every day? That is usually where us people with ADHD struggle with executing our budget. Because I've talked about this on the channel before, budget isn't a noun, it's a verb. It's something you have to keep coming back to. Managing your money is an ongoing process. And unfortunately, if the motivation is all kind of there at the beginning of creating the budget and then the end of our end term, long term goals, how are we supposed to bridge that gap in the middle? So here's where we're going to get into some of the solutions and how you can manage your money better with ADHD, understanding that our motivations are quite different from those who are neurotypical. Our motivations lie in our interest. That is what is going to get us coming back to budgeting every single day. I was really inspired to create this video when I saw Jessie from ADHD Jessie had posted a video about some of the toxic productivity pitfalls that we want to avoid when we have ADHD, and it was incredible, and I felt like so much of it also applied to how we manage our finances, and that video just sparked so many ideas in my head. So I will definitely link that video down below. It is awesome. Definitely go check it out after this one. In Jesse's video, I absolutely loved this concept. He talks about the 4 C's. Those are captivate, create, compete, and complete. Captivate, that is finding the interest in your budget, finding something that is going to make you excited to keep coming back for it. A lot of us with ADHD will find this in our personal lives as well. We'll cycle through different hobbies, different interests. We'll get really hyperfixated on an idea for a week or two, and then we're done with it because it's no longer new and interesting. I feel like I have a foundational knowledge of so many things because I've spent hours at a time over a couple of days or weeks thoroughly researching that idea because it was interesting and captivating to me, but the chances that I'm gonna go on and become an expert of that thing, not as high. The next C is create. Those of us with ADHD are often very motivated by creating new things. Again, it kind of ties in with that interest aspect. That's why so often we create a bunch of budgets that we never actually end up executing. And we can actually harness this motivation to help us kind of get through some of those hiccups in our budget. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Next C is compete. We love a good challenge. So if we can find a way to kind of gamify our budget, it is going to work so much better for us in the long term. And lastly is complete, focusing on due dates and deadlines. If you are anything like me, if you have a deadline that is in the future, guaranteed you are not going to work on that until it is truly the last minute, which is okay because normally I end up actually getting those things done when there's a deadline. But if there's not a deadline to something, whether that is a true deadline or a self-imposed deadline, I'm not going to get it done. And this is true when it comes to creating our budgets and setting our financial goals as well. Having some sort of a deadline is going to help motivate us to actually do the things we need to do to get there. You know, I'm all about finding ways to reduce your expenses without feeling restricted or deprived. So I'm super excited to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Mint Mobile. When Mint Mobile reached out about partnering on today's video, it was such an easy yes for me. Some of you might remember, I switched to Mint Mobile last year. I was able to put that money I was saving each month toward my financial goals, like my new car fund. You might have already seen those funny Mint Mobile commercials with Ryan Reynolds, who is also an owner. Mint Mobile is awesome because it offers premium wireless as low as $15 a month. And they're built on the nation's largest 5G network. But they're able to keep costs so low because they sell direct to you online. So you don't have to pay more for access to the same network. I'd been with my previous carrier for a long time, so I was worried that it'd be difficult to make the switch. But it was seriously so easy. I was able to sign up and activate it right on my phone using Mint Mobile's digital eSIM card. It took like 10 minutes, and I got to do it without ever having to step into a retail store or talk to a pushy salesperson. Plus, you can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And don't worry, if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint Mobile will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited talk and text, nationwide coverage, and mobile hotspot. So stop paying more than you need to on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. Use my link in the description to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month at mintmobile.com/avocado. Thank you so much to Mint Mobile for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into it. So now that we understand our motivation better, how can we use that motivation in relation to managing our money? The first thing that I always recommend is to anticipate some bumps in the road. There are going to be some hiccups in your budget. You're gonna stop caring about your budget. You're gonna create tons of budgets that you never actually execute. You're going to impulse spend. You are going to forget about some expenses. And rather than pretending like that's not going to happen, and then assuming that if it does happen, it's because you're broken, or you didn't do things correctly, or you're just inherently bad with money, instead understand that that's part of the process, especially for those of us with ADHD. And it is much better to prepare and to figure out ways to kind of compensate for that than to just beat ourselves up about it when it happens. So the first thing that I like to do is to create kind of like a whoops category. These are things that cover impulse purchases, things that we have forgotten about on a month-to-month basis. And then I also have a bigger whoops category that covers bigger expenses that maybe I've forgotten about. Maybe I forgot to budget for something with my car. Maybe it's just to cover a bigger ADHD tax of losing something, like the fact that I'm on my 6th Kindle. Maybe it's that I got really hyperfixated on a new hobby and I spent more on that than I would like. That fund is there to help cushion that because I know it's gonna happen. So I'm preparing for it, adding money to this category every month to help me to cover that when it comes around. So rather than sitting there and shaming and blaming myself, thinking that I messed up or I'm broken or that I'm just lazy because I couldn't execute this budget that should have been perfect, understanding that everyone already struggles with these things, but it is especially true for those of us with ADHD, especially when it comes to impulse spending, forgetting about our budgets, kind of getting off track. This can help make it a lot easier to get back on that track because it can help you from really falling deep into that pit. The next thing is to be okay with trying a bunch of new systems. We talked about during those 4 C's of motivation, the captivate and the create. And I think that you can really implement those in being okay with trying out a bunch of different budgeting techniques. Maybe something really holds your interest for a few months. Maybe you're like on the YNAB train and then you discover something else, or that's not really holding your motivation anymore. So you need to try a different budgeting method. Maybe you need to try things like the cash envelope system, which I tried and it didn't work for me, but it was definitely fun and it got me into being conscious about my money. Or you need to try a new app or some sort of fun budgeting system that you found online that maybe for the long term wasn't gonna work out, but that's okay because chances were you weren't going to stick with one budgeting system for the long term anyway. And that is totally valid. And I actually think it's really helpful for those of us with ADHD to embrace that. Embrace creating new budgets, trying out new systems, because if that is going to keep us motivated to continuously come back to our finances and manage our money, then that's all that really matters. Next is to look for ways to reignite that spark with budgeting. This really falls under that like challenge aspect of our motivation, is finding a way to gamify your budget. compete with other people. If you have someone in your life that you can do a savings challenge with, or if you want to make it like a challenge of who is going to track their expenses every day the most throughout the month, or who is going to put together a new budget, try a new budgeting system, maybe even setting a goal, a savings or a debt payoff goal that you're competing with another person with. This can be a really good way to keep us motivated and coming back for more. You can also do this with just competing with yourself, doing different savings challenges, seeing if you can save more this month than last month, making it a goal for you to come back to your budget once a day or once a week or once a month, whatever works for the budgeting system that you have, your life, and what is going to be realistic for you. But setting those small, frequent challenges, mixing it up, especially getting other people involved, because again, that's kind of like the working next to another person really helps us to focus when we have ADHD. This is kind of the same thing, budgeting with another person. Having someone who can feed off of that money management energy with and compete with is going to be so helpful. The next is focusing on micro commitments. A lot of times with traditional budgeting, it is going all in. You are creating your whole budget today. You are revamping your entire life. Again, it's kind of that spend a weekend creating your budget and then by Tuesday, you've completely abandoned it. More like maybe even Monday, you've completely abandoned it. And while that's great for creating budgets, it's not that great for actually executing budgets. And for those of us with ADHD, getting started is often the hardest part. We know we want to do these things, but we genuinely can't figure out how to get started. It's not a lack of motivation. It's not a lack of wanting to do the thing or a lack of recognizing the importance of it. It's that we genuinely just can't get started. So we need to figure out ways to make it easier for us to get started. And a lot of times, micro committing to your budget is a really good way to do this. You can focus on one aspect of your finances. You don't have to commit to creating a huge budget today. Maybe it's just that you're committing to writing down 4 of your monthly bills, or canceling one subscription that you know that you definitely don't use but you've continued to be paying for, or watching one YouTube video on personal finance. This often takes down that barrier, our main barrier of budgeting and money management, which is getting started. And then from there, usually we can kind of use some momentum to motivate us to continue going forward. Because once we have crossed that line into actively doing the thing, it's a lot easier for us to keep going if we want to, but also give yourself the grace to stop doing it once you have completed that task. If you say that you're going to go and cancel one unused subscription, you do that and then you're done, be done. That's totally okay. You want to assure yourself that if you're saying it's okay to just do this one thing, that it genuinely is okay for you to just do that one thing. But also feel free to keep going if after doing that one thing or those few little steps gets you into the money management mindset. And lastly, I always like to point out how helpful visual tools can be for budgeting. You can use these in so many different aspects. Things like visual trackers are great to kind of gamify, touch on that challenge part of our motivation, to show us our progress and get to fill in the next line of your debt payoff goal or your savings goal. I love using visual trackers. There's nothing quite as motivating to me as like getting to color in that next little piece of it. And that can actually be enough to motivate me to keep going on a day-to-day basis, especially if I have that visual reminder hanging up and I get to see how far I've come, but also how far I have to go and kind of continue to challenge myself in that way. But there are other ways that you can use visual tools as well, whether that is writing reminders to yourself on your whiteboard to budget, or maybe some bills that you need to pay, subscriptions that you need to cancel, something that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis to remind you of your budget. Because oftentimes when we have ADHD, we can create something and then like literally immediately forget that it exists. And by tomorrow, I might have completely forgotten that I took all of these hours to create this budget the day before. So having that visual reminder there to be like, oh, hey, yeah, like I did this thing and let's figure out a way that we can come back to it is going to be very helpful in changing budget from a noun to a verb when you have ADHD. I have it set up in my calendar to let me know any due dates on a monthly basis, but also on an annual basis for any annual fees or reminders of things that need to get paid. Whether those are auto pay, I try to automate whatever I can, because if it's not automated, it's probably not gonna happen, especially when it comes to paying bills. But having that reminder come up, letting you know when you have a bill due, have it set for like a reminder the day before too, especially if you're just on your budgeting journey and you're still in that paycheck to paycheck cycle where you're worried about whether you're going to have enough money in your account to pay your bills. This can be a really good reminder for you to just check, make sure that you're not gonna overdraft or that bill isn't going to bounce, so you're not stuck with late fees or overdraft fees or both. I did touch on the fact that I automate pretty much everything in my budget, and I have talked about that at length, why automating your budget is so amazing and I think crucial for those of us with ADHD. You can have some sort of an automated system for your money while also implementing all of these other tips. I will link the video down below where I talked more about that in depth and some tools that you can use, some apps that'll help you to get that automation started. But I find that it is great because then even when we do kind of fall out of the lull of budgeting, which is going to happen and that's totally okay, our money is still working for us in the background without us having to actively be motivated by managing our money. So that is it for today's video on managing your money with ADHD. Thank you so much again to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this video. It's like a dream come true getting to work with them. I genuinely love this company. And if you find yourself paying too much for your phone bill, definitely click the link down below in the description box. Check it out. I am so glad that I made that switch and I am never looking back. And thank you all so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, what kind of emoji should we leave for ADHD? Is there like a brain emoji? Maybe there's like a head, okay, either like the brain emoji or the head exploding emoji. Leave that down below if you got all the way here. Thank you all so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye.